Good afternoon, folks. We're going to talk about Dual Boot Labs this afternoon.
I'll introduce myself. My name is Stanley Patterson. I've been at Goucher for almost 6 years now. I'm a lab system administrator.
I'm Eric Gadsby. I am a senior computer and instrumentation specialist. That's a mouthful, but it basically means I deal with all the X files at the college, computer-wise, which kind of became Macs shortly after other things.
Before we start, I just want to get a show of hands of how many of you guys are actually running Dual Boot Labs. Okay.
All right, that's cool. How many want to? How many are frightened of their Dual Boot Labs? All right, sounds like a good.
Okay, so you guys pretty much are in the same place we were 5 years ago.
Yeah.
So, again, we're no experts in scripting, but we've kind of picked up some trades along the way, and lots of trial and error. But we just wanted to share our experience and also kind of make this more of a discussion, since a lot of you guys are running Dual Boot Labs. Maybe share some ideas with you, and you guys can share some ideas with us as well. So we're going to go ahead and stop talking and start the presentation.
Yeah, we'll start the presentation, but the point is not just scripting, but just a lot of, there are many ways to skin a cat, and we're open to all of them. But we'll talk about a little bit about our agenda, which is nothing real special in the respect that we're just going to go through these points, and we're going to get this stuff to Rusty so that he'll have a PDF for you guys to look at in a week or two. So don't feel like you got to jot everything down, but we'll talk a little bit just because it's sort of by obligation about where we come from, which is Goucher College.
Basically, Goucher College is a private college, pretty small, have about maybe 1,500 undergrads. We're in Towson, Maryland. It's pretty much a suburb of Baltimore, Maryland, so pretty small college.
Yeah, liberal arts, used to be a girls' school.
Yeah, now co-ed.
Now co-ed. I'm an alum. He's an alum of Gettysburg, which is about the same size, so we know the drill. But let's talk about the mission that Stan and I were given. It's now 6 years ago. And Stan was new to us at the time, but we were basically told by our director of our Center for Teaching and Learning Technology, which is sort of our technology and pedagogy division, that they wanted to do a pilot lab of dual boot machines. Was it 16?
About 16. It's a lab of 16 computers. One was a teacher station.
Right.
And basically they said, we have these, we want some more Macs, but we want to do this dual boot thing that everyone says is so fantastic. So here's a project, make it happen.
Yeah, and we didn't really know what we were getting ourselves into. And believe me, we found out.
Oh.
I'll go back? Okay.
It's just occurred to me we really haven't had a completely successful test of this equipment.
I blame myself.
So do I.
No sense worrying about it now.
Why worry? Each of us is wearing an unlicensed nuclear accelerator on his back.
Yeah. Let's get ready. Switch me on.
That's about how we felt. We didn't quite know what we were getting into. No. And we did feel a little bit like we had unlicensed nuclear equipment on our backs, but you move on. So we're going to talk a little bit about a brief history of how dual boots kind of became a thing that we could do, which is all goes with Apple and going from PowerPC to Intel. In 2005, Apple publicly announces that they would adopt the Intel microprocessor, which is, in some way, in the Apple world, is kind of the hissy fit heard around the world, at least according to Walter Isaacson, because basically Motorola couldn't deliver the processors that were powerful enough or fast enough, and Jobs decided he was going to move on. So we end up with Intel processors in our Macs. Somewhat unexpectedly, in an amazing 6-month turnaround in 2005. Now the technical aspects of the transition. So the emulation, are folks kind of understand the difference between emulation and virtualization? Anyone need that explained? But an important thing for anybody is that emulation becomes virtualization, which really becomes more practical speed. We have dual boots are available, more code becomes available, and apps become easier to port. For example, kind of a somewhat funny example is transgaming cider is an interesting example where basically games can be ported to the Intel processor very quickly because they can basically build wrappers that can use PC APIs on the Intel processors, which was something that previously, if you owned a port a game, you had to really rewrite it from the ground up. But there were many other apps that did it too. More technical aspects. Intel apps became available very quickly, and getting out of the realm of entertainment, we got the Mac got back AutoCAD, MATLAB, Maple, SPSS, well, and there is Call of Duty, and also there was a lot of Intel open source packages, Unix packages from the Linux environment, Mac port sort of stuff that we got. So a lot more opportunities. So now we get to a little bit more in the history as Apple releases Boot Camp, which is basically to prevent reverse Hackintosing, which is basically people were installing Windows on their machines. Since the Intel processor comes out, they install Windows on their machines, but there are no fan drivers, there's no thermo drivers, people basically can void their warranties very quickly. So Apple doesn't really want to be sort of shilling someone else's operating system, but they don't want to be breaking their warranties either. So that's where the Boot Camp drivers come out. And I'm going to let Stan talk about what this means to us.
Okay, so what did this really mean to the Goucher College? Well, with a dual boot lab, we no longer have to buy, like, say, for example, 16 Macs or 16 PCs. That would be like 32 computers in all. Now we could just buy 16 iMacs, put Windows on one side, put Mac on the other side, and there you have it. Also, our management was more familiar with the Intel infrastructure. PowerPC, they were like, no, we don't want to deal with that. Intel, they were a little bit more familiar with, and they were like, okay, maybe we can try this. And that's how we got the project started.
And honestly, there was even this little bit of theory, our management still had the Apple might go out of business mentality, but if they were on the Intel processor, worst comes to worst, we install Windows on the whole schmack, and we at least get our 4 years worth.
Right. And then again, more available code. Again, some are like AutoCAD, some of the software that we use in our labs like MATLAB, Maple, SPSS also became available for the Mac side once the Intel processor got implemented. And again, open source software as well. Just to kind of go off, just to where we actually started, we started with these late model 2007 Intel iMac 20 inches. And again, we had 16 of them, and it was just a pilot. And we just wanted to see, was it really reliable? Can we actually do this? And do it in a way where we can, make them, reliable, feasible to use. So, early results, it was possible, many very long hours. Many long hours. At the time, dual booting was fairly new. It was a new frontier. No one really had best practices. We were doing a lot of trial and errors. Took us weeks and weeks and weeks to do it. We were using multiple imaging tools like NetRestore, Proton Pack Server, if you guys know about Proton Pack Server, and Ghost. I actually was able to get Ghost to multicast on MacBook Pros, but not on iMac. So when it came to the iMacs, we actually had to use unicast sessions with basically external hard drives. So we had to go around, get everybody settled on the Mac side, and then we go on the Windows side and we'd actually plug in, start a Ghost session, let Ghost run, and then on to the next one. So it took a very long time to Ghost, and sometimes it took us 4 to 7 days to do it.
And if I could interject something, Stan, we made a joke about Ghostbusters earlier, and actually Semantic Ghost is kind of, how many folks have used Semantic Ghost? Okay, so you all know that it's kind of old reliable in this environment. And that's, that was what we were really shooting for. Ideally, we wanted a procedure that was as reliable as Ghost could be.
Yeah, and I almost got it working on the iMacs, is that I could never get the network drivers to actually work on my boot disk. It will work for the MacBooks and the MacBook Pros, but I could never get it to work on iMac. So we were running out of time, so we just decided to do with external hard drives, and we did it that way. But how we do it now is a lot better, a lot more efficient. And just some of the current tools that we're using now, like Deploy Studio, to actually push out the Mac and Windows images. Also, boot picker is, once you got the OSs together, how do you get your users to actually, interact with the two OSs once they're on the same machine? And then again, we're using ARD, Mac OS X 10 server, and then some of the hardware we're using is an X server, Mac Mini, and a durable storage unit. And this image here is just our setup that's in our building now. It's just our imaging room, and there's a little Mac Mini up here, and that pretty much takes care of all of our new boxes that come in. We'll go ahead and set them up an image in that room. And for our bigger lab, which is in our Athenaeum, which is our big library, we basically have an X server, and then we have a couple of durable units for the actual storage of the images. And we actually push out all of our, all the summer imaging is done from this room. We basically net boot the machines, and then they pull images from this location. And most. Are you multicasting over? We're not multicasting. We're unicasting. We've played around with multicasting, and I've been asking that question since I've been here. Has anyone had luck with multicasting? I don't know. Has anyone had luck with?
Are you talking about the Windows side or the Mac side? Or either?
Deploy Studio in general.
Yeah, in general.
Yeah, Deploy Studio with the Mac side, yes. With the NTFS images, no.
So I guess we'll take a stop here. And how many Deploy Studio aficionados do we have in the audience? Okay. So you're in good company.
All right. And again, we are basically in our environment, we're AD, basically a Windows shop. So everyone authenticates the AD. We're also on the Windows side for management and user experience. We're using the magic triangle with OD. And
for the Mac side.
On the Mac side. And on the Windows side, we use GPOs, SCCM, and another third-party tool called Desktop Authority. And just to show you our labs now, we started off with 16 dual boot labs. Now we're up to about 60 iMacs. Our biggest area is the Information Commons, which is here. They have about 45 iMacs in that location. And I'll show you another picture. And then we have a library classroom, which has about 16 iMacs in here as well, with a teacher station. So this is pretty much our biggest lab area with dual boot iMacs. They're open 24/7 during the school year. And I'm gonna hand this off to Eric just to kind of go over the imaging process and just show you how we actually get it imaging and out to the machines.
Absolutely, and something to mention is we do have a couple. We have a chem lab or two that has some dual boots. We have some other places. It's something we've leveraged a couple places. But we could have done two things for you today, which is we could have brought a box out and sort of brought a couple boxes out and tried to image the box out for you, but we didn't want to haul it all down from Baltimore. So we made you a video, which we'll just take you through, which is about sort of how things work in that deployment room that Stan was showing you. So this is a new Mac out of the box. And basically you're going to do what you think you'll do is you'll plug in our Ethernet. We're going to plug in USB because we're going to need that for keyboard and mouse. And then eventually we'll get to the power because wireless power hasn't been invented yet, which is a shame. And now you're going to see one of our student workers here. He's going to boot a couple of boxes. He's going to power the boxes on. He's going to hold down the Alt key. And then eventually when that gets up, he's going to hold down the N key. These are fresh boxes. They don't have firmware passwords or anything, so he's just going to be able to dual boot, or not dual boot, rather net boot at this point. Now bear in mind, this process can take a while, depending on how big your payload is. So we've artificially sped it up. But he's dual booting here, I keep saying dual boot. That's what this is about, but that's not what he's doing. And here's a close-up, and you'll see there's the net boot server. He's selecting it. And very briefly, you'll see the planet icon come up, and then you'll see the gear, macOS is loading. And what happens after that is eventually these screens will flip over, and you'll see the Deploy Studio badge, and that's entered into the Deploy Studio runtime environment. So now here's the Deploy Studio runtime environment. We've got multiple workflows for different kinds of setups. When you press that start or play button, it'll start pushing out the image and doing some other things. Right now, it's gonna, in our particular case, we're leveling the hard drive in case there's any old data or whatever Apple provided. It levels the hard drive. Then it's gonna break it into 2 partitions for us. And what happens next is after that happens, we start bringing over the image. Now the image is coming from our server, across our network. And first it's gonna copy the Mac image, which is a little fuzzy here. Then it's gonna copy the Windows image. It's gonna restart. It's gonna say, I'm finished. When we restart, we've got a dual boot Mac. That's a lot simpler looking than it really is. And I guess we'll go through the anatomy of what actually is happening, what that workflow that they've pulled up, what actually happens here. And these aren't great pictures. This projector is a little fuzzy for this, is we basically build up here a workflow which has different, you can drag from a menu that's actually off the screen here now. You can drag on different operations that they've pre-coded from in the Deploy Studio admin. So this is looking at it on our server. And here's our building like I showed that we were leveling the drive. And this is then we're breaking the drive apart. And everything is, once we sort of test everything, and we can talk about this a little bit, they've got the automate checkbox. So that basically means if that were not checked, the Deploy Studio would keep flashing up with you. Do you want to do this? Do you want to keep doing this? When if you do automate, it'll just get to the end of the last task and move on to the next task. So it becomes really easy plug and play. And then we have where it's going to load the 2 operating systems. First, we're loading a Mac image, and it's doing some things it's not going to check the restoration. You can do a bunch of. There's a great level of granularity, and we don't use all of Deploy Studio's features. Then we're going to load the Windows image, and what's implicit at the end of every workflow is that little green checkbox. That little "I'm done. I'm going to restart." Unless there is a workflow item, you can throw at the back to say, I don't want to do that. But if you don't put that in your workflow, it's just going to restart. And it's going to switch from the netboot into onto your new images. And Stan's going to talk to you a little bit more about what's kind of going on through the wires.
Just getting back to our infrastructure a little bit. In our library, the Athenaeum, we don't have a gigabit network. Everything's on 10100. So imaging's a little slower. I'm seeing the.
This is also a building that opened in 2010. We don't understand why.
Yes. 10 is basically on 10100. But again, as you can see, we have our netboot sets, Deploy Studio. We have an AFP share for our Deploy Studio, and then DHCP server, which is a Windows box. And again, all the lab clients, they connect back to our X server and grabs the images and pushes it back down. And another image just with our imaging room. We actually have a gig switch there, which we like to actually image there because it's so much faster. Again, we're just utilizing a gig switch, and instead of an X server, we're using a Mac Mini server. And we thought there might be some performance issues because we originally had an X server in that room, but it's actually a lot better. The deployments have been a lot faster with the gig and also including with the Mac Mini server. So performance is actually a lot better than what it was with the original X server we had in there.
It's also a small room, so it's nice that it's quieter. It's cooler.
Quieter, and cooler.
Getting kind of suntan off that X serve.
We have some post-imaging processes that we've developed now, some scripts that kind of help us out with joining the machines to the domain. APS helped us out a lot. Apple Professional Services.
How many folks have used Apple Professional Services or are aware of whom they are? Okay.
Well, they helped us. They basically helped script a auto bind script for us, where basically once the machines are imaged, we log in initially with a local admin login, and we basically get a pop-up. We put the computer name in, it then reboots the machine, it joins it to AD, OD, and that machine is ready to go. On the Windows side, I've developed an answer file with sysprep to basically kind of do all the default settings. And I'm actually working on a file now to actually join the Windows to the domain as well. I mean, for now, when the machine comes on, we have to actually still touch the machines, join it to the domain. And I'm still working on it because in Active Directory, we have some group policies that we have to actually take the machines and throw them from one OU to another lab OU to actually get the correct policies. But there's some stuff I'm working on. And then in the end, it's just configure boot picker so that the users can actually pick which OS they want to use. And this is actually what we use and how we've configured it and designed it.
Before we go to the next slide, because it sounds like some folks have worked with Apple Professional Services, we should probably explain what that is, but not a lot. We should explain what that is. Apple Professional Services are basically Apple consultants, mostly sort of bash enthusiasts, scripters and system engineers for hire. So if you approach AFP, and it's basically, unlike an Apple Care kind of package, it's a encounter-based scenario. You basically approach them, you kind of approach them with your pseudocode or your sort of your objective, saying, I want an auto-bind script, or I want something that'll help me manage a share. We did a project we're not going to talk about here involved managing, old files on a share, on an AFP share. You go to them, you kind of make your sort of scope of work with them, and then they'll do some coding for you. Now, I know if some folks here are more talented with scripting than us, then that's something you might be able to develop in-house. But if not, it's a really good alternative because Apple's pre-developed a lot of these scripts. They just come into your environment, take a look at the way your environment's set up, and then they sort of have these scripts sort of pre-developed, and they just start plugging in your variables. It's relatively inexpensive and important, and we'll get to a very important tip about that later. But we'll move on to management, so we're talking about management because getting the OS on the computer is one thing, but we are an undergraduate institution, so ultimately the purpose of these machines is for pedagogy. So we need to have both management and a user experience that helps the students get their learning objectives accomplished. So I'll talk about Mac OS 10, and then Windows will be talked about by Stan. So we use Magic Triangle. How many folks use Magic Triangle? So I will take a brief explanation of what Magic Triangle is that basically means you've got your AD server, Active Directory server, which provides your user table, and then you have an Mac OS 10 server running Open Directory, and that provides the Workgroup Manager. It gives you access to what is known as MCX, and that you can set all kinds of things like what the position of your dock is, what control panels people have access to,
Control panels, docks, printers,
shares they are and are not able to connect to.
Applications, yeah, certain applications, power management.
System preferences.
Yeah, system preferences, locking that down. Like in our digital arts classroom, we don't want people to kind of go in and mess with sound. We've locked that down. And there's some other, we don't want people playing around with, especially on our teacher stations, actual displays. After we set up mirroring, we don't want people to come in and take off the mirror and another professor comes in and says, hey, I can't project my presentation. So we do some lockdown from there as well.
Yeah, and some things we can't do, we do with login and log off hooks, which are, that may be a technology you're familiar with, but it's basically a bash script that runs at login and log off as root. So we can do system level stuff because it's running as root. And then we use Apple Remote Desktop for updates, and we also have a local Apple update server. And I'll let Stan talk to you about Windows.
On the Windows side, again, we have AD and we use a lot of GPOs. We also use Desktop Authority, which is a third-party tool by Script Logic. It has some functions as the GPO editor. I know when we were running with SMS, Desktop Authority was a lot better. Since going to not SMS, I'm getting ahead of myself. With 2003 GPOs, they weren't as good, so Desktop Authority had a few more features, and it was actually easier to push out those policies. Since we've upgraded to 2008 R2, the GPOs have been a lot better. We're actually thinking about using more GPOs, pushing out more GPOs than using the desktop authority, but we're still on the fence with it. But again, desktop authority and the GPOs allows us to push out updates as well as certain scripts. We do have a WASA server as well as SCCM to do some more management and push out updates and also do some security as well. But I'll get a little bit more into that as we go a little further along, but just to kind of whet you guys' appetite a little bit.
Yeah, and just this is sort of a late invitation, and I'm sorry, it just occurred to me, but we're doing a lot of acronym soup here. So if we throw out any tool, any three-letter combination that you don't know what we're talking about, just point it out, and we'll do our best to remember what they're for. We know what they do, but we're going to get to sort of some of the heart and soul of what we do, and where we really hit our stride was user experience parity. I don't know how many folks in the group consider user experience with any seriousness, but it's important to us at Goucher, and we are trying to sort of push this notion of no preferred operating system, that each operating system is equal. And in that way, I think we'll divide it up again. I'll take Mac, and Stan will talk to you a little bit about Windows. But on the Mac, they are access to Active Directory. We use the managed client, MCX, which is Workgroup Manager. We use log and log off, folks. I'm sort of repeating myself. ARD, Apple Remote Desktop. This is where things really get good in the parity department. Is the student's desktops forward. Student logs in, they get all the items that appear on their desktop. That's coming from their network home directory. And we also sort of did some work, that came with our Apple Professional Services, some of their work. And also we sort of improved the way our printing is done. How many folks are familiar with CUPS? Okay, CUPS, which is the Common Unix Printing System, is really neat. That's how printers are provided to a stock Mac OS box, but we need to make it a little bit more like Windows print management to make it work. How many folks use PaperCut? Anyone? So PaperCut, we got only one in the audience, so. And Stan's a PaperCut guy, so I'm actually going to throw PaperCut to him and then let him take the second.
Well, I'm not going to try to repeat myself again, but again, we use AD, group policy, and desktop authority. And desktop authority handles the desktop forwarding, and actually explain a little bit more about desktop forwarding. When we first started, students who logged in on a Mac machine, they did not get the same desktop forwarding as they would on a PC. And what I mean by desktop forwarding, they had a desktop folder, they have a My Documents folder, and a Favorites folder, My Pictures folder.
That live on the network.
All lives on the network, under the network folder. And basically, when we first started, because of the Mac OS X didn't have that, people would save on their desktop, assuming that it was going to their Darwin drive, which is their network folder, which it didn't. So they would save stuff there, and they said, "Oh, I thought I saved it on my Darwin folder," and they didn't. And that's when we really had to get something figured out with the desktop forwarding, because we had it on the Windows side and really wanted it on the Mac side, because we ran into a lot of issues where students were losing data because it wasn't forwarded. But now, a user logs in on a Mac, they save something on the desktop, they then log in on a PC, it's going to be there. And also PaperCut. PaperCut's our print management. Students get 500 printer points a year. They're going to get that pop-up on a PC, they're going to get that pop-up on a Mac, and it follows with them.
In a few minutes, you'll see what we're talking about.
But yeah, again, parity was a huge selling point for our campus, because when we first started, users like, I don't like this. It's different. I have to save differently on the Mac than I have to do on a PC, and that's where we kind of got a lot of feedback and some negative stuff. Kind of like, we don't like this. We don't think this is going to work. So we kind of went back to the drawing board and said, how can we make this work, since we've put so much time and effort into it? But Eric's going to move over to the next slide to kind of show you a little bit of what a user might see at our campus.
Well, first we'll start with stock. You're going to see sort of two sets of slides here. This is, I'm sure you're all familiar with more or less what a Mac looks like if you install a stock OS on it. You've got your swirling galaxy, your hard drive, and your sort of stock Apple icons. But at Goucher College, you log in, and you in fact get this, which is it's not a Mac. It is absolutely. I mean, while we try to get user parity, we're trying to still capitalize on the good things about both the Windows operating system and the Mac operating system, unique applications, that sort of thing. But the kind of things you'll see here is like we've got a customized dock. These items are coming from their network drive. Stan called it Darwin. That's just the host name we use. After of course the famous scientist. And they see their shares mounted. And the paper cut box, which basically tells them how many, it's kind of like a little deduction system. When you print, it says you're going to be deducted a point. This is basically a management tool we put in place for the students so that we found students using our color printers to print 1,000 pages of, the celebrity du jour, and it was just wasting toner. So we kind of made them a little bit more aware of their printing habits through that software, but works on Mac OS and Windows. And Stan is going to talk to you about sort of the same scenario.
Again, this is, I just took an image of one of our office desktops, and again, it's pretty basic. They don't really have a lot of the, desktop forwarding. It doesn't look, there's nothing here as far as what a lab setup would be. It's kind of basic, something which you would see in an office setting. But in the next slide, this is what a student would see when they logged in on the PC partition of one of the dual boots. Again, it's going to have the Goucher College desktop. They're going to have their desktop forwarded. Anything they put on a desktop is going to follow them. Again, paper cut again. And we just did a custom image, but we kind of did the different colors just to kind of identify when we were walking around, who was on Windows, who was on Mac, just to kind of help us out with troubleshooting sometimes. Someone would say, I'm on an iMac. Do you know if you're on Windows or Mac? And they were like, I don't know. So when we would go there to help them out, we could identify, like as we were walking up, okay, they're on a Mac. They're on Mac OS X, or they're in Windows 7. Kind of helped us out. But again, it's the same almost the same user experience. With some of our applications now, they're almost the same. We try to help out the students as far as what applications they might need, so that they don't have to just log off and log back in. But we'll get a little bit more into more applications and some of those issues that we've faced, and how we're going to try to take care of that.
And something to talk about with desktop forwarding is it's not just about a Mac PC parity thing. It's also just about not locking anyone to any individual workstation, because the nightmare scenario for any of our students is I worked overnight on an exam that's super important, saved it to a drive somewhere, and then I either forgot what computer it was or it crashed, and now I'm out of luck.
Right.
Okay.
I just have a quick question about that. Are you guys actually redirecting to the network drive totally, or is it syncing and caching?
No, it's going.
Totally, okay.
Yes. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yes, and I should give a caveat. This is redirecting just the desktop folder and just my documents.
Okay.
The app data on Windows is not being redirected. The library, which is now hidden in line, but the library folder is not redirected on Mac OS. We even had some custom code put in that Final Cut very certainly, implicitly, never redirects to our network, because our network would just kind of explode if people put Final Cut documents on there. But does that answer your question?
Yeah. I was just curious about that.
So we'll talk about some lessons learned. So Stan, why don't you?
Well, one lesson learned, we didn't like working late at night, especially working from 7 o'clock in the morning and then going home at midnight in the beginning. We also liked pizza, ate plenty of that. But
Worked in a haunted building for a while too. That was fun too.
each year we approached it a little differently. After we did it, me and Eric kind of sat down and say, how can we do this better? We didn't like this process, and each year we kind of went back to the drawing board. Okay, that didn't work. Took that out, put something else back in, and we just kept, getting at it, working at it. Also, this process is not as cost effective. And what I mean by that is, from a labor point of view, it's long hours, long man hours, getting this set up, especially when we first started, because again, it was the frontier. No one had a best practices or a real, good way to do dual boot. So we were kind of learning as we were doing.
Well, so let's do a little math here, which is So traditional lab. Let's say we got 15 Macs, 15 PCs, right? So that becomes 30. So we bought 30 iMacs to dual boot. What is the real number here? 60. Exactly. That there's a lot of, it's basically each machine is really 2 computers. So,
a lot of work. And also, one thing that you guys probably experienced this as well, dual booting isn't always well received. And what I mean is, some people might say, oh, I don't want dual boots. I'll never use it. Or some might say, oh, I want a dual boot Mac. And then when you check their statistics, they only log into Windows and never into Mac.
Or vice versa.
Or vice versa. And we've run into that a lot where people, they wanted the Macs and then they're not using them the way that they were initially set up. And then again, user experience parity helped out a lot. When we were able to work out the kinks on the Mac OS side and actually build it up to, get print management working better, getting the desktop forwarding working, users were then saying, okay, now I want to use the dual boots. I know how to save my files now. Okay, this looks familiar to me. And, I can go from Mac OS X and I can go to Windows and I can find my files. It looks almost the same. And also, Apple hardware, definitely good return on investment. We haven't had a problem with them.
Anything in the silver glass sort of class of machines has been really...
We haven't had a problem. When we moved over to our new building, which is with the Anthony with the Information Commons, we got a big batch of Dell Optiplex 960s, and me and myself and another colleague actually had to replace a bunch of power supplies in them. I've never had to take those iMacs apart, including the original 16 that we had.
No, and it's something to keep in mind about what we learned is, and this is something that is kind of not great news, but is 5 years was important. It wasn't that it took us 5 years to muck around in the dark till we found it. Also, we had to take 5 years to listen to our users, to find out what they wanted. User experience is a lot about listening. And so we started off with kind of just with a good guess at what they might want and what we knew we could accomplish. And then we started collecting feedback and implemented the things we did based on that. So you got to build in some of that time. It's not great. You'd love to just get from 0 to hero immediately. It's not possible. So how far have we come? We are no longer a pilot. At Goucher, we've gone from this pilot to now we're a 24/7 academic resource. And to pull out a phrase used in the news to describe a certain car company, this project has now become too big to fail from the college's point of view. This is our main academic lab. So we are very invested in this, and we're not backing out anytime soon. When we were just sort of in the 15 zone, the head of the center who had given us that mandate, she could have pulled the plug. She could have said this isn't working, and she was close on several occasions. And we now have a better imaging process, which I'll let Stan talk about.
Again, first dual boot deployment, it took us 3 days. Again, 12-hour days, maybe a little longer, some weekends. And it was only 16 machines, not 60, 16. Again, we're using multiple imaging tools. We were doing one-to-ones on the Windows with Ghost and an external hard drive. I think we had 3. That was brutal. And there was no automated imaging process as well. Everything we had to touch the computers with joining the machines to OD and Active Directory. And your fingers start hurting after a while doing it on 16 machines twice.
Yes.
So.
And it introduces a lot of potential for human error.
Right, exactly. You had tons of human error. Now it takes us about 3 to 6 hours to do 60 machines, and that's with 2 images.
We should stop and talk about our Mac image a minute.
Our Mac image, it's pretty big. It has Final Cut Studio on it. It's got Adobe Suite, has some other video editing software. And we're running about, 90, 95 gigs on the Mac side.
Yeah.
On the Windows side, we're pushing about 24, 30 gigs. And it takes us about, like I said, 3 to 6 hours to do it now, which is a lot better than before. Again, Deploy Studio. I need to really donate to those guys because they have really helped us out with deploying our dual boot labs. the workflow.
Thank God for those Irish engineers.
Everything now is pretty much automated as far as formatting the hard drives, partitioning them, and then actually pushing out the images. I don't have to wait till Mac OS X is done. Now I have to image Windows. It all gets done automatically for us. And we're making the process even more automated on the back end as far as implementing the auto bind script and also doing the same thing on the Windows side. So we're almost to a point where we're not doing too many clicks. And then hopefully we'll figure out the multicasting on Deploy Studio. I also want to make sure that I mentioned that it's unicast right now. We're trying to figure out multicast.
And something to keep in mind is, Deploy Studio, folks have worked with it. How many folks have worked with Apple System Restore, which are command line tools? Apple's built basically its own version of Ghost into the OS from the beginning. But Deploy Studio is basically just a nice front for this. None of this is particularly sophisticated to learn. You just kind of got to go through the PDFs provided. Takes a little bit of time, but you don't have to be a super gearhead to. Because we're jacks of all trades, Smith and none, so. Better user experience. Well, we've talked a lot about user experience, and they're almost identical now. Anything else?
No, again, pretty much identical. Definitely with location-based printing now, users will get it. And sometimes, we work in IT. Printers go down. We have to give, especially around now, it's finals times. Printers goes down. I have to give my users another alternative printer. Working with Apple Professional Services, that helps us out now. Before, me and Eric and a student work would actually have to touch the machines, regenerate a new printer for that lab. Now we don't have to do it. We can do it almost remotely now. So someone says a printer's down, there's another printer available. We can just make a quick change, and then that's it. They'll get the new printer, and they're working without any problems.
Now, something if anyone has any more specific questions about what we're doing with printing, see us after the session, because Managed Client for X and some other products do manage printers too, but we have green initiatives where we are, where everything has to duplex, and that makes printer definition files, PPDs, significantly more complicated. So we implemented something a little bit more automated, but a little bit more homegrown.
Yeah.
What we could do better. Deploy Studio is great.
Yep, but as you know, we need gigabit. 10100 doesn't cut it. It's too slow. I want to say the process can be a lot faster if we were utilizing a gigabit switch. Last year, our timetable to image was kind of cut short. So we had to find a gigabit switch to do our labs. Because now that we've got the process down, they expect us to kind of do these labs like in a day or two. So, and there's, things happen, nothing's perfect. Also, hard drive geometry. I don't know if you guys have caught this problem on the Windows side. In our main lab, we have two different models of iMacs, and they have different hard drive sizes. I think one's 250, and the other one's maybe 350. Yeah. So when you get into the Windows side, you have to make sure you have your proper hard drive partition size, because if it's too small and you try to put it with a different drive geometry, it's gonna squawk at you. And we've just have to I almost have to pretty much build two different iMac images. I'll build a base, and then I'll build it up, and then squeeze down the partition so that we can actually get the workflow going. I don't know if anyone's gotten around. If you did.
This is a suggestion I heard yesterday. Do the Windows partition first. Give the Mac the rest.
Yeah, we've tried that.
We've tried that, and it still kind of squawks at us.
Okay.
Yeah, but
I assume you're current on Deploy Studio?
Yeah.
Never worked for me way back when I tried it back in ancient Rev 2 years ago.
Yeah, and there is a checkbox in the interface, but it never works.
Right. But somebody said yesterday, if you create the Windows partition to a set size first, then use the balance for the Mac, it works now.
And that's we'll try it again. I know last year we tried it.
Okay.
We was like, well, maybe we'll do the Windows side first.
Several major revs ago.
Yeah.
So they're a pretty agile product or project.
We'll definitely give it a shot, but thank you.
Yeah.
Definitely. Also, and another thing is, it doesn't image a whole disk, but again, the workflows take care of this, so it's not a big issue.
And no quick access. Basically, you still have this issue that a machine has to reboot itself. And there's no real substitute this time for boot picker. How many folks have encountered the boot picker product? Okay, and we showed you a picture of it. That was that thing that showed those nice big happy icons of you want Mac, you want Windows. And Apple, it was originally developed by, how do you pronounce his last name? Because I can never do it. Mike?
Come on, Michael Bombich? Bombich?
Yeah. It was developed by Mike, and then Mike got eaten by Apple for a little while, and they took over the product. And then Mike left Apple, and Apple's kind of killed the product because it's not technically Lion compatible, despite the fact that we've loaded it up in Lion and it works. But the other option is refit, if people have worked with refit. But the problem with refit is it's a pre-boot environment, so it doesn't have any thermal control, it doesn't have any remote desktop control. So if something's stuck on the, and it has no screensaver. So you can,
Firmware password too.
yeah.
Yep, that too. And yeah.
So,
Where we are, we have it default to an operating system. It doesn't stay on the boot picking screen.
Right.
So it stays on the boot picking screen for maybe a minute.
Right.
And then it goes to the default.
yeah, absolutely. And that's a way to do it. That's certainly a valid way to do it. The way we kind of go with is just trying to give people that action, that availability at any login screen. Because we have a script running in Windows that basically doesn't, when you log off of Windows, you don't log off of Windows, you restart. And you go back to boot picker. Which is technically just running on top of the login window of Mac OS X. So we'll talk about management. Management can be a little tricky.
Yeah, management, when we're pushing out updates, especially Windows updates, they're not in Windows side, they're not going to get those updates right there. And sometimes there's some critical updates that we want to push out as far as, OS updates or antivirus updates that we might want to push out. So we kind of have to say, okay, which side are they on? And then we've kind of worked around it on the Windows side. We kind of just do a timetable and say, they should all come into the Windows side, within 3 weeks. So they'll grab the updates. But again, it's still kind of hard if you need to push something right away. And the same thing with Mac OS X.
Yeah.
We want to push something through ARD. We'll go in and say, okay, all right, they're not on Windows. So this group will get it, and then we have to memorize, take note which one the next ones need to get it. So some updates,
The ARD task server helps with that a little. I mean, we had that problem with, I'm sure a lot of you guys, folks faced down the Java incursion recently. So that was something we had to do.
Right.
I think these are reiterations of what stuff we've said already.
Yeah, we can go.
So what is next? And I'm going to let Stan talk about what is next for Windows, which is actually not dual booting at all.
So what's next? Virtualization. And what I mean by virtualization, not Parallels, not VMware Fusion, VDI infrastructure. Right now, I've actually have a Zen desktop, a Citrix Zen desktop environment running. It's compatible with iOS, Android, Windows, Mac, pretty much anything that can get a web browser. So here in this image here, I'm on my test box, and I actually just pulled up one of the test lab machines from off that VDI environment. So now, no longer do I need that boot picker. If I'm a user and I need to use, like, say, the Past Perfect software, which is a library software, I can just open up that VDI, log in, use it, log off, and I haven't had to reboot my machine. That takes care of all those reboots, long login times, and also management. I can manage my images now, my VDI images. I make an image off my golden image, then I push it out to the virtual machines. So now the management issue has also been taken care of.
It's on a server. This is not a disk image of any
Yeah.
kind living on our Mac OS machines.
Right. Again, it's a VDI infrastructure, an actual infrastructure with hosts on the back ends that's powering the Zen desktop environment. And it's worked pretty well. We've pushed it out to a few labs, and this is a way that I think we're going to go into the dual boot labs, and no longer will there be dual boots, but actually just give the option to pull up a virtual machine, use it, and close it without rebooting it.
Which, of course, would cut our deploying in half.
Yes.
And the other thing we're doing for Mac OS is we love Deploy Studio. We love Mac OS X server, but we're about to break up with them. and we're going to probably be moving to Casper Suite, which I'm not sure how many folks have either used their product or attended their sessions, but and that's partially because Casper Suite offers a whole lot of things, and partially because Apple is kind of broken up with the enterprise environment. So 10 server 7 is not as competent, and they killed the server iron. So we just we're looking for something because Casper can run in a completely Linux environment if we need it to. So that's where we're going with that. We're actually, what was it? We got a PO waiting for that.
Yeah.
But so we are going through a lot of changes this summer. We'll catch up with you next year to see if we survive. And I'll let Stan go with our summary.
So basically, just a quick summary, wrap it up. Again, what worked? Deploy Studio, Apple Professional Services with helping us with print management, desktop forwarding, automation definitely helped out a lot. Of course, Boot Picker, we really like it. And the parity with user experience, that really sold the Dual Boot Labs to the students. Like I said before, students really didn't like it. Now they love it. I mean, I'm in there now. I go into the lab, and they're using the labs. You go in there, every day the labs are full. They're using it. They're not, I don't want to go there. They really love the labs now.
That's actually that's a management problem, actually. And what didn't work for us is when we had no parity between the OSs, there were problems, and when we had manual imaging process, that was a problem. And then the underutilization or not great acceptance of dual booting, that presented problems. And some of those are in the past, some of them are still present. We have a small dual boot environment in our physics department where that's what they thought they wanted, and then when they saw how it worked, they're not going to repeat, next image cycle, they're not repeating it. But, because they didn't, it sounded better to them on paper than it did. Half our physicists are Mac people, and half our physicists are staunchly Mac people, and half of them are staunchly Windows people. And these are the teacher stations in classrooms. And the ones that are Windows people found having to reboot disorienting, and they didn't understand. They thought they were running virtual machines. They had just a lot of user misunderstandings about it.
Yeah.
And being physicists, if there are any physicists in the audience, I'm sorry, they have very strong opinions, and they're our faculty. We do what they want.
But that's pretty much our presentation. Just a couple of resources. Have some links, and again, they're gonna put this up on the website. I think in a couple of weeks. So if any of you guys want, especially like with Casper Suite, Desktop Authority. Citrix and Desktop, especially Apple Professional Services. We have some links here that you guys can check out. And then we're just going to open up the floor to some questions if you guys have it.
I have one thing to say about Apple Professional Services. That's kind of a relatively well-guarded secret by Apple. And if you're in an EDU environment, if you have your Apple system engineer, he or she is your go-to. If you want to initiate that kind of an interaction. You talk to that person, and they get you in touch with it. But there is one little website about it, but it's not well elaborate. It's not.
Yeah, it's a PDF. They have number and contact information at the bottom. But again, if you guys are interested in it, I would say definitely check it out. It actually helped us out a lot of times. Yeah.
So we have about 15 minutes. Yeah. Any questions, thoughts, ideas? Go for it.
I just had a couple questions. So you guys said it takes you about 3 hours to do 60 machines?
3 to 6. 3 to 6.
3 to 6?
Yeah, 3 to 6 hours.
And you guys are unicasting?
Unicast.
And how many machines are you doing at a time? Like, do you do batches of like 10 and it takes like half an hour or 45 minutes, or you guys do all 60?
How we do it now is just because it's only just me and Eric and maybe another student worker. We'll do, actually, if you don't mind.
Yeah. He's getting back to the picture.
So in the pictures here, the majority of our machines are in this one row, and it kind of goes back. What we might do is we might start all the way up here and then take across one of the extra rows. So that's like up to 20, 30 machines right there. And then we'll do the other half. We'll do the library classroom by itself. And then we have a Mac Pro Lab. That's a digital arts classroom. We'll do that by
Mac
its.
only.
It's Mac only, but we'll do that alone. But we break them up in batches. We would like to be able to do them all at once, but we just don't have the manpower to do that. But we break them up in batches.
And something we've noticed, I don't know if anyone else who uses Deploy Studio with NetBoot has noticed, there's a memory leak in Deploy Studio that basically you get so many boxes booted that you'll suddenly see your your available memory on your server go to nothing. There's a terminal command called purge. And if you set up like a launch D job to run I think we have it running every 8 minutes or something.
Yeah, it'll purge the memory.
It'll purge the memory. Basically, the best thing to do is just to try this, start running Deploy Studio and see how fast your memory gets eaten up. Like just open up the activity monitor and see how fast it gets eaten up and set your cron or your launch D to run the purge that so often. One caveat on purge, you have to install the developer tools.
Yeah.
Purge does not come on the stock OS. So
Any other questions?
I think you had a question, sir?
I have several.
Yeah.
All the way from ridiculous to hopefully reasonable.
Okay, we like all.
You mentioned in the video, first step was to hold down the Alt key. I've never tripped over that one.
Alt or Option.
Right,
And if you do that, that's between Control and Command.
right,
And that will bring up the EFI boot menu.
okay. Why not just hold down the N key to NetBoot?
Honestly, it's a force of habit, and partially
Actually, the reason why is because we didn't
we didn't talk about this.
we didn't talk about it. All of our labs have EFI passwords.
Right.
So we have to hold down Alt Option to bring up the password prompt. We'll
Okay.
put in the password, and then we can go.
And that's where it becomes a force of habit, is that
So for a new machine out of the box, you just, okay.
Yeah.
you could do N2.
Yeah,
But
yeah, but it's not a force of habit because that's what we have to do because they're locked down.
Okay. Next question, can we talk about Windows partitioning for just a minute?
Sure.
Yeah.
What size partition have you guys been running? How many gigs? 20, 30, 40?
We've tried to split them in half.
as evenly as we can.
Yeah.
Okay. So split it in half. And how do you go about doing Windows partition creation? When you're going to deploy that?
When I'm going to deploy it, usually I'll take one of the iMacs, like a test iMac, and I'll actually set the partition ahead of time.
Right.
So say if it's a 300 gig, I'll split it up to 150. Then I'll just actually install and build it up from the base from there.
So this is monolithic imaging. We're not using package-based imaging.
Okay, so you're using Deploy Studio to grab that Windows side image.
Yes,
Okay. Have you guys ever used WinClone?
we have.
We have.
Okay. There's a brand new version out.
Mm-hmm.
He's charging for it now.
Yep,
And it's Windows 7 compatible.
right.
I don't know if that does anything for you or not in terms of resizing images and compression.
It can do that.
The old version was real flaky.
Yeah,
Right.
I played around with the old version before, create my images, and
I have
like
the
you
new
said, it was
copy. I bought it at some
and we
point.
didn't play around with it, but I do want to play with the new version of WinClone. But
I'll give it to you, Stan. It's on this laptop.
As far as desktop forwarding, can you talk about that? What's the mechanism you're using?
from which side, Mac or Windows or?
Both.
Okay, I can tell you about the Windows side. Desktop Authority is doing that. You can do this from a GPO as well, from a group policy editor.
Okay.
I want to say it's in the user configuration. You can set that up, especially if you guys have Windows Server 2008 R2.
Right.
That's a lot better than 2003. In my VDI environment, I'm actually thinking about just using GPOs completely because Desktop Authority is, you log in, you get this Desktop Authority, and it has to load. And that slows down the login time, especially with Windows 7. They have slow login times anyhow. So I would say, Desktop Authority you have to pay for, but I would say explore the GPOs because you can do it from there. You can set it up.
How about the Mac side? Are you?
Fairy dust. No, it's bash script and symlinks. It's basically, we've got a script that basically is polls the directory services, finds out what the user's name and user directory. That's why we had to go to the script wizards to do it, because it basically does all this script work, pulls the name, the path, creates a symlink, destroys the local folder, builds the symlink, and passes it out.
So in other words, when they're looking for documents, for instance, or desktop, it's redirecting them to the network.
Correct. And we haven't at this point developed an offline version of this. For example, we can't use this with our faculty and staff and laptops that like go off the network. This is really, we could probably take another engagement or send ourselves to script school and probably find a way to do an offline version of it. But this is, if you pull the cord, you don't get desktop forwarding.
So when you're binding the Mac side to AD, are you, I think you asked this question earlier, are you using any local caching at all, or is this a purely network environment?
Like are the mobile accounts?
Are you using mobile account? Are you creating a local directory for caches, or are you just going straight network?
It is sort of hybridized on the Mac OS because it's this bind script that was provided by Apple. It builds a local document. It builds a local, so let's call our, Stan's, let's just say Stan's username is Stan.
Right.
It builds a folder in the user's folder called Stan, but then it is passing, but then the symlinks are put into to those places. But to keep the server clean and to keep the user experience fast, the library and some other things are kept locally.
Right.
But because it's all being handled by sort of custom scripting, if you went into like the user table, it would report it as neither mobile nor local. It would report it as kind of as custom.
Okay.
Or just it would barf at you, really.
Go ahead.
Just while we're on the subject, are you guys hosting the home folders on AFP, CIF shares, SMB, like?
SMB.
SMB. They're all going back to a Windows file server.
Okay.
Okay, so you're really leveraging AD's network home directory as far as that goes. Does AD buy you anything else?
History. It's just what we had,
Right. I mean, it gives you authentication on login.
Right.
And you're getting a network home directory out of it. Are you able to use anything else? Have you modified the schema?
No,
No.
we haven't. And that's why we do the magic triangle.
Sure.
AD it provides us that is what, we got into enterprise computing in the mid-90s, coming off sort of a Unix mainframe. And at that point, the question was, so is Apple going out of business? Is Unix too hard to use? Windows. So it's just kind of our history.
Sure. Okay.
And right now, the history is kind of repeating itself because OD, for all we know, may go away. Basically, we don't trust the next version of 10 server for any further than we can throw it. So, and Linux, it's not an option, but it's just nothing that's come up.
As far as that, the auto binding scripts and the redirects and the symlinks and stuff, is that something you're comfortable sharing, or is any of that proprietary? Or?
We're under non-disclosure about that.
Okay.
We are comfortable sharing. Call your system engineer,
Gotcha.
and they will. And the price is good. Let me put it this way: the price is under $5K.
If you want to learn about it on the Windows side, I can share it with you.
He can.
Or you can go and Google it. It's
Sure.
it's a. I want to say as soon as you go into the group policy editor, you just kind of just fill in the blanks and that's it, and then
But
it's ready to go.
On the Mac side, it's custom software they build for you, and they make you sign an NDA. They just say, we build it for you. Don't give it to other people. We wish we could.
Yeah, how generous of you. Yeah.
So, and then
Yeah.
Just wondering why you guys decided to go with monolithic images versus, something that will build itself, like you're sticking yourself with one piece of hardware that update, and if you have other labs with different software, then, or licensing wise, you're kind of stuck.
well, we're actually looking at doing like the package-based building as a base, and then from there, kind of starting up the machine and then installing whatever custom software. We generally build a base image, make a backup, so that then from there we can make a public lab image, a computer science image, a chemistry image from there. Between the different labs, it's only like a couple of different pieces of software that might need to be added.
And a couple different models. Some of it's history too. Again, we come from the Ghost lineage where it's monolithic imaging. And there's to a degree, there's also the notion that as much as package-based imaging is really cool and can be really efficient, certain really weird things, let's just say Adobe products, you have to kind of get in there, and sometimes a monolithic image is the way that you go in and you find that P list and you tweak it. And you might be able to deliver that in the PostScript, you might not be able.
Right.
Sometimes it's just, package is kind of science, monolithic is kind of art, and we just kind of grew up on the art. So,
But it's something that we are looking into maybe doing this summer.
And that's more Casper's way. So it's not, like as I say, we're not.
It's definitely something to look at.
I'm not sure if you played with it or not.
I play with like the Apple imaging tools. It wasn't as nice. I played with Casper's, the Composer?
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's a lot easier to use, so.
Yep.
Exactly. Any more questions?
There's a question. Yep.
I had a couple more.
Sure.
So you guys are doing the home folder redirection or desktop forwarding. Are you got, and these are, some machines are lab, like general access lab environments where multiple people are doing. Are you guys using like Veronix deep freeze or baseline shield on Windows or anything like that?
In certain very limited cases.
Okay.
For the most part, these are pretty locked down, standard operating environment kind of machines. They don't have a lot of privileges. And Workgroup Manager, at least on the Mac side, and Desktop
We have a
Authority.
few group policies and some policies that we can implement from Desktop Authority. And then SCCM also allows us to do some other stuff as well.
They're pretty locked up.
Yeah.
We have a couple of machines where we've had to give people a little more access, or we've found that people have defeated our security, and there we'll use deep freeze.
Yeah.
But deep freeze has got its own, like, imaging and deep freeze is nasty. So we just,
Yeah.
And then, how long have you guys been doing the desktop forwarding?
about 2.5 years.
So it's been a while.
For the Macs, yeah. Desktop forwarding on the Windows side, it's more than 6.
What is that?
Yeah.
And desktop forwarding on the Mac was iterative. We started off with a very basic script, and then we, at some point, recontacted Apple and had them come do a second encounter with us. And again, it's one of these user experience things that we took a year and we kind of learned what we didn't like about the first version, and we called them up and said, here's our knock list. Can we tighten this up any?
So, you're
So you're running Final Cut Studio Pro?
We are running Final Cut 7,
Okay.
7 Studio.
Where do the students save their raw video?
Oh, I'll show you. Right there. So,
go back. Go
oh,
up.
I got the preview screens.
Skylab, that's the server that they talk to, and then where their storage gets saved is here on this durable storage unit.
Which is not, that's the only Mac sharing environment we keep, and that's an open share.
Just to tell you a story, we have a digital arts classroom, and a student actually tried to put up a video on her network folder. She literally took up all the space on the storage unit. No one could save. So we
That's
had to
on our
put it
Windows storage
on the
unit.
Windows storage. So we ended up putting a policy that blocked, Final Cut Studio, and now we have a good policy and process in place now that the students now save the Skylab, and it is backed up and.
So that's the default location, like when they just capture something, it would just go right.
Right, and then the Apple Professional Studio Services, then they set up a script for us that actually will create a new folder for a new user. And what it does is it'll kind of go and do some checksums like, is there a folder already exists? And if it doesn't, it creates a new one for them. Then that student can then put their media files there. Because right now we have a policy in place that you can't put any music or video on your network folder. But
On
they
our
can
Windows
do
network
on the
folder.
Windows network. But on the Apple, on the Mac side, you can do it connected to our Skylab storage.
And not to walk back on what Stan said, but actually, no, they do store locally at first, just for caching purposes,
And then
and then they move it onto the server.
They move it themselves.
Right, or we're working on a script that'll kind of click this and it'll transport it over. We were hoping to go with Final Cut Server, but Apple pulled the plug on that too. And we cried. But
Are you limiting the user storage space on either the medium?
on the Windows side, absolutely.
yes, on Windows side, yes, but on.
What's your storage?
Nah, I think we give them about 500 megs. and that's it.
Over 10100, if you give them 500 megs, that's going to take a lot of login sometimes.
Right.
Yeah, it's only 500 megs, and we do see some login issues where people have everything stored on their desktop. It's like, oh man, it takes forever login. I usually just tell them like, clean up your desktop or like put it in your My Documents folder where it's somewhere else, or just shrink your storage.
And this server we're talking about here, this video share, is kind of unlimited, and it kind of functions through anonymity. You basically have to be enrolled in the digital arts class before someone gives you the path to it. And it also has the script that we have running. Basically says anything that hasn't been touched in a year is destroyed. So it just sort of it's a self-cleaning kind of. Anything that's named improperly will be renamed. If it doesn't have it, if our nomenclature for naming is the username. If it can't search the directory services and find the name, it moves it into a folder that says it's called abandoned, and then it gets destroyed in half a year. So we do all these things that kind of keep things running pretty smoothly on that server. Sure.
I just have one last question.
Sure.
Using Bootpicker, because we're using Bootpicker as well. It does work online, which is awesome. I was scared of that.
Make sure you keep your DMG of it, though, because they've removed it from the Apple site.
How long does it normally take? I mean, for us on the Mac side, it's relatively quick to log in because it's already sitting there. OS booted. How long does it take you guys normally to reboot, like after you guys hit it? Just because we're looking at it from a user experience
Yeah.
in a lab environment. So I was just curious.
We've timed it at about 2 minutes.
About two.
Yeah, because as it's coming back, it might pull in some updated policies from my,
Policies.
yeah.
And it's very interesting because we have some of it's also in the users' heads. It's very interesting because actually the users think that Windows logs in faster, but that's because Windows pops up little boxes that says I'm doing stuff. When Mac OS 10, when you log in and it's like processing background scripts or whatever, it just sort of sits there. So people think it's Helm. Apple's provided us, I don't know, if you've ever done any work with Apple Professional Services, they provide this wonderful utility, which you could ask about if you ever go to them, called Big Honkin' Text, which basically you'll throw these big menus up, these big messages on screen. And we started implementing that. We now have a message that comes and says, your profile is loading, please. It's working. Don't freak out. Well, probably a little more professional sounding than that, but.
Any more questions?
More questions, thoughts, complaints? Candy?
You said you're still working on binding. Once you've imaged the machine, you're still individually binding, sitting down in front of it?
Windows.
Windows.
And Mac OS to a limited degree. I'll talk about Mac OS in a second. We use back to that screen of the boxes. We actually kind of do a human logical numbering scheme. This is number 1, this is number 2, number 3, number 4. Deploy Studio will do like dynamically generated naming as to whatever machine comes online first.
Okay.
We want to do the binding so that we have somewhat a logical, these machines are labeled. When people call the help desk, they say, I'm sitting at workstation number 3, and it's freaking out at me. So that way we do have to do manual hostname input. And I'll let Stan talk about.
Yeah, but with the auto bind script, once you type in the name, that's it. You go on to the next one because it does everything for you.
We're technically done, but we're here as long as you need us to be.
On the Windows side, I have an answer file that takes care of some of the stuff. And that kind of runs back into the same issues with the answer file could join it to the domain, but then again, it's not in the chronological order that it needs to be in. So we have to physically touch each machine, join it to the domain. And that does get time consuming, but I'm actually working on an answer file that's going to help me with that, or at least a script so that I can at least get to the desktop, let that launch, and then it can join it to the domain without me typing username and password in.
And there's
60, 70 times.
And there's some more advanced features in Deploy Studio, for example, and Casper, that once something has been joined under a name and it re-images, it will give it the same name. So it's like moving forward, we probably won't, that'll become a little more automated. But that's the problem, is we trade off that whole sort of giving it a nice human readable nomenclature 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 versus if we had just had it, because I think what's it deploys to just names it the MAC address or the serial number or some
You
random
can play around
string.
with the name and scheme a little bit to
But-
get the numbers, but it won't be in the right chronological order. You might have 1, 3, 4, 5, 2.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yep. Anything else?
Maybe we can throw something out to the group and just anybody else is trying to do because that's the problem, a lot of the problem we've been having with trying to manage is not necessarily the management part of it, because when you're trying to do changes on either side but they're frozen, you get in this whole situation where you need to reboot the computer like 3 or 4 times from one side to the other. I don't know if anyone's come up with a good solution for that isn't like trying to set up scheduled tasks in both, ARD and deep freeze console, etc. And hope that they both run at the same times.
We just close the lab at a certain time and we run the schedule. We have Casper sleep running on the Mac side and we use the deep freeze console. And we schedule deep freeze at 2 and then at 1:30 we tell the kids, hey, the machine's going to shut down whether you like it or not, no matter what you're doing. And it goes through a whole rigmarole. It works pretty well. I haven't had any real, big stuff with it. The only time I've actually, except when you do like really large, pushes, but other than that, it works relatively well for us. Yeah, I mean, I have some stuff scheduled with deep freeze commands, setting schedules, ARD, on how to thaw it, and thaw it. Our lab's closed on the weekends, so that's normally when it runs. So it doesn't really interrupt people, and we can actually tell it to boot thaw at this time on the Mac side, and then we'll take care of that and the Windows side at the same time. But just depends on how many times you want it to be, or you want it to be thawed for a certain time frame. You set it to be thawed at 10 p.m., then set it to reboot and be frozen at 6 a.m. And so you have that window essentially.
I think the thing we've been having issues with, just because I only really do the MacAdmin side of it, and our Windows admin hates trying to figure out ARD. I don't know why it's super easy, but but basically, so his thing is basically he's trying to find out if there's any. He's trying to get me to find out if there's any way, for example, we have them set to automatically, because we're also using boot picker, automatically going to the Mac side when they reboot. So he's trying to find, is there some way, a command that you can, so you can, when you're on the Windows side, there's a command line thing for boot camp. You can say reboot and reboot to the Mac side. But is there any way to say reboot, when you reboot, stay on the Windows side, don't go back to Mac, without actually changing, just like this one time.
If you have the Casper speed, you can say at this time, restart back into Windows.
Yeah.
And I don't think there is though, a command line.
Yeah.
Just for next time, only, yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know the syntax, but it does
Are you
exist.
talking about to bless the firmware?
No,
Yeah.
if you're on the
We're on
Windows
Windows
side,
side.
want it to reboot and stay in the Windows side instead of defaulting
Right.
to the OS, if that's your default operating system.
Yeah, because I know how to do that on the Mac side.
There's a way to
Sure
do it,
that
there's,
that from the
yeah.
Windows. Same thing.
I need to jump in a sec. I mean, the conversation can continue if people need to continue it, but if you need to slip out, be sure to drop your paper in the box. Take candy. We're not taking it back to Baltimore. And I'm not trying to kick you out. I'm just want to get that said. And our cards are up front.
Put some up.
Our cards are up front if you need us. And Mac Enterprise Listserv. Great place to learn about this stuff. We're on there a lot.